Good morning and welcome to Sunday School at Cedar Lane United Methodist Church. One of the techniques used in advertising is called testimonials. And those testimonials are given by people who have benefited by the product that's being advertised. In general, a testimonial is very effective. Um, and I can kind of prove it. I found myself offering testimonials after eating at a particular grill. Their fried okra was outstanding, and I'm still talking about it. Now, we use a different kind of testimonial in church. We ask for people to tell us how they have seen God at work in their lives. Around here, we call it a glory sighting. Those testimonials can be very powerful as well. They're so personal, and we see how the person's life has been affected. Saul of Tarsus had a real zeal for following God, following the God he thought he knew. Jesus redirected that zeal to preach the good news of forgiveness of sins and new life to the Gentiles. The Bible introduces Paul in Acts 7:58 through 8:3. The mob was laying their cloaks at his feet while he consented to the stoning of Stephen. Paul's conversion story is given 3 times in the book of Acts. Chapter 9, verses 1 through 31, chapter 22, verses 3 through 15, which is our scriptures for today, and chapter 26, verse 1 through 23. His encounter with Jesus changed him from a zealous persecutor of those who believed in Jesus to a man who proclaimed with great zeal the good news of Jesus, the Christ, to all who would listen. After his third missionary journey around AD 58, Paul returned to Jerusalem. I have to remind myself that Paul was not a stranger in Jerusalem. He was born in Tarsus of Cilicia, but he was raised in Jerusalem. He was taught by one of the leading Jewish teachers and was a passionate member of the Pharisees. He asked for and received papers from the high priest and the entire council to go and arrest followers of the way in Damascus. His name just wasn't known. He was known by people in high places in Jerusalem. So we have to keep that in mind when he comes back to Jerusalem. And upon his arrival in Jerusalem, he met with the disciples and gave his testimony, his glory sightings of all that God had done through his ministry. Afterward, the elders asked Paul to help 4 other men to fulfill a vow to demonstrate that he had not abandoned Moses and the law. Reports had already come to the believers in Jerusalem that Paul was telling Jews to forsake Moses and the Jewish customs. The disciples, by asking him to do this, were trying to prevent a conflict from starting when Paul's presence became generally known in the populace. Paul did what they asked, but it didn't work. Jews from Asia falsely accused Paul of taking Gentiles into the temple. They had seen him with a Gentile in Jerusalem. The whole city became involved in the uproar, They dragged Paul out of the temple area and shut the gates. All sorts of accusations were being made. Word made it to the Roman tribune, and he brought centurions and foot soldiers to quell the uproar. The soldiers ended up taking Paul back to the barracks, but they physically had to carry him up the stairs to the barracks because of the crowd. Think about that. Have to pick him up and let's go. Now, Paul obviously had a lot of chutzpah. Before they brought him inside the barracks, he politely asked. I must emphasize that. He politely asked the tribune to speak to the crowd. And given the situation, it's even more surprising that he was given permission. So Acts 22, 1 through 5. Paul is beginning his defense to the crowd. Brethren and fathers, hear the defense which I now make before you. And when they heard he addressed them in the Hebrew language, they were the more quiet. And he said, I am a Jew, born at Tarsus in Cilicia, but brought up in this city at the feet of Gamaliel, educated according to the strict manner of the law of our fathers, being zealous for God as you all are this day. I persecuted this way to the death, binding and delivering to prison both men and women, as the high priest and the whole council of elders bear me witness. From them I received letters to the brethren, and I journeyed to Damascus to take those also who were there and bring them in bonds to Jerusalem to be punished. Now I'm reading out of the Revised Standard Version. Paul had addressed the tribune in Greek, but he changed to Hebrew as he began his defense to the crowd. They had quieted when he raised his arm to speak, held it up, okay, he's going to say something. But when they heard him speaking in Hebrew, they got even quieter. They hushed. They wanted to hear what he was speaking. And in this, it kind of seems to me that the crowd really didn't know who Paul was. And they didn't know what all this controversy was about. They had literally become a mob. In his defense, he pointed out that he'd been just like them, even more so. He was so zealous, he was willing to help kill people to defend the faith. In the crowd's eyes, that would have been a very good thing. He even had the support of the high priest, which was probably Caiaphas, and the whole council to go to Jerusalem, to Damascus, and arrest the believers there and bring them back to Jerusalem. Acts 22, 6 through 11. As I made my journey and drew near to Damascus, about noon, a great light from heaven suddenly shone about me. And I fell to the ground and heard a voice saying to me, Saul, Saul, why do you persecute me? And I answered, Who are you, Lord? And he said to me, I am Jesus of Nazareth, whom you are persecuting. Now those who were with me saw the light, but did not hear the voice of the one who was speaking to me. And I said, What shall I do, Lord? And the Lord said to me, Rise, go into Damascus, and there you will be told all that is appointed for you to do. And when I could not see because of the brightness of the light, I was led by the hand by those who were with me and came into Damascus. Paul was stopped in his tracks by a bright light. When I read this, I had, of course, to think about the transfiguration of Jesus when Peter and James and John were there. And his face shone like the sun, and we know how bright that is. And his garments were as white as light. What Saul saw was the light of glory. That's what enveloped him. Saul would not have recognized Jesus' voice. There is no record of Paul ever meeting Jesus. Notice that Saul doesn't answer Jesus' question, "Why are you persecuting me?" He instead asked, "Who was speaking?" Our author advises us not to get too excited about Saul calling Jesus Lord. The word Lord also meant sir. So when Saul says, "Who are you, Lord?" he may have been saying, "Who are you, sir?" A little different interpretation. For myself, I can't wrap my mind around the amount of confusion Saul must have had at this point. Jesus, who to Saul's mind was dead, was speaking to him. And Jesus was identifying with all of those whom Saul had and was looking forward to persecuting for their belief in Jesus. I don't think there was another response possible than, "What shall I do, Lord?" I'm always amazed at how God does things. God allowed Saul's companions to see the light, but not be blinded by it. But they didn't hear Jesus' voice as he talked with Saul. They were witnesses of something miraculous, but God kept his conversation with Saul private. Just a little thing. And in that conversation, Jesus didn't lay out all the details of Saul's ministry. He said, "Go into Damascus." That's the next step. How true it is in our lives, we'll get a direction and it's for the next step. So we have to learn to take the next step and trust that God will be there to show us the following step. Saul had a problem, though. He couldn't see to walk into Damascus. He had to have help. His friends, the people with him, led him into Damascus. And later, he would learn to lean heavily on others to do the ministry to which he was called. The same is true for us. We are the body of Christ, and it takes all of us to fulfill our calling. Chapter 22, 12 through 15. And one Ananias, a devout man according to the law, well spoken of by all the Jews who lived there, came to me and standing by me said to me, "Brother Saul, receive your sight." And in that very hour I received my sight and saw him. And he said, "The God of our fathers appointed you to know his will, to see the just one, and to hear voice from his mouth. For you will be a witness for him to all men of what you have seen and heard." As part of this testimony, Paul tells the crowd about Ananias, a Jew in Damascus who was above reproach according to the law. Ananias could testify as to Paul's claims. Needed a witness. That's part of the law. You need a witness. He came to where Saul was staying on State Street, laid his hands on him, and prayed, if that's what you call it. He just said, receive your sight. And Saul did. And he told Saul what God was calling him to do, to know God's will, to see the just one, the righteous one, to hear a voice from his mouth. That changes, to me, and I'm just thinking about this, because we call him Apostle Paul, that changes his status because he did see and he did hear Jesus speak. And all of this occurred because God was calling him to be a witness to all that he had seen and heard. Now, Acts 9, if you want to read it, contains a more detailed recounting of this event. I thought of a couple of reasons why God would choose Ananias to restore Paul's sight. I mean, let's face it, God could have just got him in there and all of a sudden his sight returned. But the first reason would be that Ananias, a Jew who observed the law, would provide that witness for Paul's claims. The second reason would be a little more close to home. Ananias would be Paul's witness, Saul's witness, in Damascus. The brethren there knew Saul was coming to Damascus, and they were afraid of him. They knew that he had letters. So Saul began preaching in Damascus right away. He didn't wait a long time. He started preaching. So Ananias was there to say, this is not a sham. This is not a trick. This is not some scheme to entrap you so that he can take you back to Jerusalem. This is a demonstration of God's ability to change the heart of a man in an instant. In a vision, God opened Peter's heart to understand that the gospel was for all people. God opened Paul's heart and his understanding that Jesus was indeed God's Messiah for all people. That means those who do not believe in him even today. So continue to pray for all of those who do not believe, that the eyes of their understanding would be open so that they can see the truth of the gospel of Jesus Christ. Thank you for being with us today. God bless.